The DNA test meant to save my daughter's life just exposed my mother's 30-year-old lie. Now, my entire family is hunting me down. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway always made me feel like I was trapped inside an empty milk carton, white, sterile, and entirely devoid of air. I sat in the plastic chair, my fingers digging into the fabric of my jeans until my knuckles turned the color of the walls. Across from me, Mark was pacing. He'd been pacing for 3 hours, his heavy boots clicking rhythmically against the linoleum. Every click felt like a countdown. "Maya, sit down," I whispered, though I wasn't speaking to him. I was speaking to the ghost of the life we had 48 hours ago. Our daughter, Lily, was 6. She should have been at soccer practice, complaining about the orange slices being too sour. Instead, she was 3 doors down, hooked up to a machine that beeped with a terrifying rhythmic fragility. 2 days ago, a routine blood test for a persistent fever turned into an emergency admission. Leukemia. The word felt heavy, like a wet wool blanket thrown over our heads. But the doctors gave us a silver lining. It was highly treatable, and a bone marrow transplant from a primary relative had a staggering success rate. "We'll both test?" "Obviously," Mark had said immediately, his voice cracking but firm. He loved Lily with a fierce, protective desperation that made me marry him in the first place. We had both given our cheek swabs yesterday morning, because Mark was her biological father, and I was her biological mother. The doctors assured us that while a perfect match usually comes from a sibling, parents often present a strong partial match that can buy valuable time, or in some genetic anomalies, a full match. The heavy wooden door to Dr. Evans's office clicked open. He didn't look up from his tablet immediately, which is the international medical code for "I have complicated news." "Mr. and Mrs. Vance," Dr. Evans said, gesturing to the 2 chairs in front of his desk. Mark stopped pacing and practically threw himself into the seat next to me, grabbing my hand. His palm was sweaty. "We have the preliminary genetic screening back for the bone marrow compatibility," Dr. Evans began, adjusting his glasses. "The good news is that we have an exceptional match profile. Lily's markers are highly receptive." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Tuesday. Thank God. "Is it me or Mark?" Dr. Evans paused. He looked at Mark, then at me, then down at his tablet. The silence stretched, suddenly loud. "Mr. Vance is a partial match. Adequate, but not ideal. However, we ran into an anomaly with your sample, Mrs. Vance." "An anomaly?" My heart did a strange, erratic flutter. "What do you mean? Am I not a match?" "It's not that you aren't a match for the transplant, Maya," Dr. Evans said softly, switching his tone from clinical to deeply cautious. "It's that genetically speaking, you cannot be Lily's biological mother." The room tilted. I actually laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that startled all of us. "I'm sorry, what?" "I carried her for 9 months. I was in labor for 26 hours at St. Jude's Hospital. My husband watched her come out of me." "What are you talking about?" "I know it sounds impossible," Dr. Evans said, his voice entirely leveled. "We ran the panel 3 times because we assumed a lab mix-up, but the maternal genetic markers do not align at all. However, there is a secondary anomaly. While you share 0 maternal DNA with Lily, your husband's DNA matches her perfectly as a biological father." I turned my head slowly to look at Mark. His grip on my hand hadn't loosened. It had tightened to the point of pain. His face wasn't pale with confusion. It was frozen. A mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "Mark?" I whispered. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Dr. Evans. "The only way this genetic profile is possible, Maya," Dr. Evans continued, each word hitting me like a physical blow, "is if the biological mother of Lily is someone closely related to you, specifically someone who shares a massive amount of your family's distinct genetic lineage, or if there was a surrogacy situation using an egg from your immediate family that you somehow forgot to mention." The world went entirely silent. I couldn't hear the hospital hum. I couldn't hear Mark's ragged breathing. My mind raced backward through the last 7 years. Mark and I had struggled to conceive for 18 months before Lily arrived. During that time, my family had been deeply involved. My mother, Eleanor, had recommended a private fertility clinic. She had paid for the initial rounds of treatments as a gift. She had managed the paperwork because I was too overwhelmed with grief after our second miscarriage. The clinic, I breathed, the realization dropping into my stomach like lead. My mother's clinic. "Maya, let's go home and talk," Mark choked out, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot, swimming with tears and something else. Guilt, deep systemic guilt. "Who is she, Mark?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Whose egg did they use?" "Maya, please not here. Who is Lily's mother, Mark?" I screamed, slamming my hands onto the doctor's desk. Dr. Evans looked away, clearing his throat. Mark covered his face with his hands and let out a broken sob. "It's Chloe," he whispered through his fingers. "Chloe, my 24-year-old sister, my mother's golden child, the sister who lived in our guest house for 3 months the year I finally got pregnant." The drive back to our suburban house was dead silent. I didn't cry. The shock had bypassed my tear ducts and settled straight into my bones, turning me into something cold and mechanical. Mark kept his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Every few minutes, he would open his mouth to speak, see my profile against the passenger window, and close it again. When we pulled into the driveway of our beautiful 4-bedroom colonial, the house my mother had helped us buy, I didn't get out immediately. I looked at the manicured lawn. I looked at the wreath on the front door. Everything about my life had been curated. By Mark, by my mother, by everyone except me. "In the house," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the engine. We walked into the kitchen. The morning coffee pot was still sitting on the counter, cold and stale. I stood by the island, refusing to sit. If I sat, I might collapse. "Talk," I commanded. Mark Mark dropped his keys on the counter. They made a loud, clattering sound. Maya, it's not what you think. It wasn't an affair. I swear to you on Lily's life, I have never touched your sister. Then explain how my sister's egg is inside my daughter, I said, the words tasting like ash. Explain how Dr. Evans just told me that my entire life is a medical forgery. Mark sank onto a bar stool, burying his face in his hands. 7 years ago, after your second miscarriage, the doctors at the first clinic told us your ovarian reserve was depleted. They said you wouldn't be able to carry a child using your own eggs. You were in such a dark place, Maya. You were talking about wanting to sleep and never wake up. I was terrified I was going to lose you. So you went behind my back? No. I wanted to tell you, but your mother stopped me, Mark cried out, looking up with desperation in his eyes. Eleanor came to me. She said if we told you that you needed an egg donor, it would break your spirit completely. She said you would feel like a failure as a woman. She proposed a solution. She said Chloe had agreed to harvest her eggs secretly. That way, the baby would still be entirely your family's bloodline. It would look like you, have your family's traits. Eleanor handled everything at the new clinic. She bought the doctors. She altered the medical records. She made sure your name was on the birth certificate from day one. I stared at him. And you agreed to this? You let me carry a baby believing she was mine, while you and my mother shared this disgusting little secret? I did it for you, Mark shouted, tears streaming down his face. I wanted to give you a family. I wanted to save you from that depression. Don't you dare rewrite history to make yourself the hero. I snapped, the anger finally bursting through the ice. You lied to me every single day for 7 years. Every time I looked at Lily and looked for my eyes in hers, you knew. Every time my mother made comments about how Lily looked exactly like the women in our family, she wasn't complimenting me. She was mocking me. The betrayal was a physical weight, crushing my chest. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman obsessed with legacy, appearance, and control. She ran our family like a corporate dictatorship. But this was monstrous. Does Chloe know? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Mark hesitated. That 1-second delay told me everything. She knows, I whispered. Of course she knows. She was the one who had to go through the retrieval. She lived in our guest house that spring because she was recovering from a bad breakup. She wasn't recovering. She was being pumped full of hormones by my mother. Maya, Chloe did it out of love, Mark pleaded, reaching for my hand. I flinched away as if his skin were radioactive. She wanted to give her sister a baby. If she did it out of love, she would have told me, I said. If you did it out of love, you wouldn't have hidden it. You all treated me like an incubator for my sister's child. My phone vibrated on the counter. The caller ID showed a photo of my mother, smiling elegantly at a charity gala. I picked it up. Maya, darling, Eleanor's crisp, commanding voice echoed through the speaker. Dr. Evans's office just called me. Apparently, there was a genetic discrepancy with Lily's tests. I've already contacted the chief of medicine to have those records sealed and the lab technician reprimanded for leaking faulty data. I'm coming over. She didn't sound worried about Lily's leukemia. She sounded worried about her empire. Don't bother, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I already know. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. The poised, untouchable Eleanor Vance suddenly sounded very human and very dangerous. Maya, stay exactly where you are. Do not speak to anyone else. We are coming to fix this. She was bringing reinforcements. Within 20 minutes, the heavy oak front door of my house swung open without a knock. My mother walked in first, wearing a tailored cream trench coat that looked like armor. Behind her was my father, Richard, always the silent partner in her schemes. And finally, Chloe. Chloe looked beautiful, as always, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. She was wearing an oversized sweater, her hands tucked into her sleeves. The sight of her made my stomach turn. This was the girl I had protected from bullies, the sister I had bought a car for when she graduated college. Mark stood up instantly, stepping between me and my family like a referee in a match he had fixed. Eleanor, she knows everything. The clinic records, Chloe's involvement. It's over. Nothing is over until I say it is, Eleanor said, throwing her designer handbag onto my kitchen island. She turned her sharp ice blue eyes onto me. Maya, look at me. I am looking at you, I said, standing my ground on the other side of the island. And for the first time in my life, I see exactly what you are. You are being hysterical, Eleanor said smoothly, her voice dropping into that soothing, manipulative tone she used whenever she was cornered. We did what was necessary to preserve this family. You were suicidal after your second miscarriage, Maya. You were a shell of a person. If we had told you the truth, it would have destroyed you. We gave you a daughter. We gave you a life. You stole my autonomy. I screamed, the tears finally breaking through. You violated my body. You put an embryo into me under false pretenses. That is a crime, Mother. That is medical fraud. It was a private family arrangement, my father, Richard, spoke up, his voice gravelly. The paperwork was handled legally through the clinic's specialized programs. No laws were broken, Maya. Your names are on the birth certificate. Because you bribed them. I turned my gaze to Chloe, who was shrinking against the entryway wall. And you sat at my dining room table every Sunday. You held Lily when she was a baby. You watched me stay up for 3 nights straight when she had croup, crying because I was terrified I wasn't a good enough mother. Did you feel good about yourself? Did you look at my daughter and think, that's mine? Maya, stop it, Chloe burst out, tears spilling down her cheeks. I did it for you. Mom told me you would die if you didn't have a baby. I didn't want my big sister to die. I never wanted to be her mother. I'm her aunt. That's all I've ever wanted to be. You're a liar, I said, the venom dripping from my voice. You all are. Be very careful with your words, Maya, Eleanor warned, her demeanor hardening. The elegant facade was slipping away, revealing the ruthless woman woman underneath. Lily is currently in a pediatric oncology ward. She needs a bone marrow transplant. Mark is a partial match, but the doctors told me that Chloe is a near perfect match. Because she is the biological mother, her marrow could cure Lily completely with almost zero chance of rejection. My heart froze. What? Yes, Eleanor said, a cruel, triumphant smile touching the corners of her lips. Chloe is the key to saving Lily's life, but this family functions on unity. If you go public with this, if you file lawsuits, if you blow up this marriage and defame my name, I will ensure Chloe takes the first flight out of this country. I will tie up your medical authorizations in court for months. Lily doesn't have months, Maya. I stared at my mother, completely paralyzed. She was using my dying daughter as leverage to protect her secret. You wouldn't, I whispered. She's your granddaughter, and you are my daughter, and yet you are threatening to ruin everything I've built, Eleanor said coldly. We sign a non-disclosure agreement within the family. We proceed with the transplant quietly. You stay married to Mark, and we never speak of this again. That is the price for Lily's life. I looked at Mark. He was looking at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. He was going to let her do it. He was going to let them blackmail me into a lifetime of silence and lies. I looked at Chloe. She looked terrified, but she didn't contradict our mother. She was going along with it. They thought they had me trapped. They thought a mother's love would make me a slave to their secret forever. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just Eleanor's daughter anymore. I was Lily's mother, and a mother fights dirty when her child is on the line. Get out of my house, I said softly. Maya, did you not hear what I just said? Eleanor barked. I said, get out, I repeated, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. I tapped the screen, revealing that the voice recorder application had been running since the moment they walked into the room. I have every word of this conversation recorded. Every word of your confession. Mom, every word of your extortion. Eleanor's face drained of color. If Chloe is not at that hospital tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. giving her preliminary cells for the transplant, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. This audio file goes to the state medical board, the police, and every local news outlet in the city. Now get the hell out of my house before I call the cops for trespassing. Within 20 minutes, the heavy oak front door of my house swung open without a knock. My mother walked in first, wearing a tailored cream trench coat that looked like armor. Behind her was my father, Richard, always the silent partner in her schemes. And finally, Chloe. Chloe looked beautiful, as always, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. She was wearing an oversized sweater, her hands tucked into her sleeves. The sight of her made my stomach turn. This was the girl I had protected from bullies, the sister I had bought a car for when she graduated college. Mark stood up instantly, stepping between me and my family like a referee in a match he had fixed. Eleanor, she knows everything. The clinic records, Chloe's involvement. It's over. Nothing is over until I say it is, Eleanor said, throwing her designer handbag onto my kitchen island. She turned her sharp ice blue eyes onto me. Maya, look at me. I am looking at you, I said, standing my ground on the other side of the island. And for the first time in my life, I see exactly what you are. You are being hysterical, Eleanor said smoothly, her voice dropping into that soothing, manipulative tone she used whenever she was cornered. We did what was necessary to preserve this family. You were suicidal after your second miscarriage, Maya. You were a shell of a person. If we had told you the truth, it would have destroyed you. We gave you a daughter. We gave you a life. You stole my autonomy. I screamed, the tears finally breaking through. You violated my body. You put an embryo into me under false pretenses. That is a crime, Mother. That is medical fraud. It was a private family arrangement, my father, Richard, spoke up, his voice gravelly. The paperwork was handled legally through the clinic's specialized programs. No laws were broken, Maya. Your names are on the birth certificate. Because you bribed them. I turned my gaze to Chloe, who was shrinking against the entryway wall. And you sat at my dining room table every Sunday. You held Lily when she was a baby. You watched me stay up for 3 nights straight when she had croup, crying because I was terrified I wasn't a good enough mother. Did you feel good about yourself? Did you look at my daughter and think, that's mine? Maya, stop it, Chloe burst out, tears spilling down her cheeks. I did it for you. Mom told me you would die if you didn't have a baby. I didn't want my big sister to die. I never wanted to be her mother. I'm her aunt. That's all I've ever wanted to be. You're a liar, I said, the venom dripping from my voice. You all are. Be very careful with your words, Maya, Eleanor warned, her demeanor hardening. The elegant facade was slipping away, revealing the ruthless woman underneath. Lily is currently in a pediatric oncology ward. She needs a bone marrow transplant. Mark is a partial match, but the doctors told me that Chloe is a near perfect match. Because she is the biological mother, her marrow could cure Lily completely with almost zero chance of rejection. My heart froze. What? Yes, Eleanor said, a cruel, triumphant smile touching the corners of her lips. Chloe is the key to saving Lily's life, but this family functions on unity. If you go public with this, if you file lawsuits, if you blow up this marriage and defame my name, I will ensure Chloe takes the first flight out of this country. I will tie up your medical authorizations in court for months. Lily doesn't have months, Maya. I stared at my mother, completely paralyzed. She was using my dying daughter as leverage to protect her secret. You wouldn't, I whispered. She's your granddaughter. And you are my daughter, and yet you are threatening to ruin everything I've built, Eleanor said coldly. We sign a non-disclosure agreement within the family. We proceed with the transplant quietly. You stay married to Mark, and we never speak of this again. That is the price for Lily's life. I looked at Mark. He was looking at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. He was going to let her do it. He was going to to let them blackmail me into a lifetime of silence and lies. I looked at Chloe. She looked terrified, but she didn't contradict our mother. She was going along with it. They thought they had me trapped. They thought a mother's love would make me a slave to their secret forever. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just Eleanor's daughter anymore. I was Lily's mother, and a mother fights dirty when her child is on the line. Get out of my house, I said softly. Maya, did you not hear what I just said? Eleanor barked. I said, get out, I repeated, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. I tapped the screen, revealing that the voice recorder application had been running since the moment they walked into the room. I have every word of this conversation recorded. Every word of your confession, Mom, every word of your extortion. Eleanor's face drained of color. If Chloe is not at that hospital tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. giving her preliminary cells for the transplant, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. This audio file goes to the state medical board, the police, and every local news outlet in the city. Now get the hell out of my house before I call the cops for trespassing. The night passed in a blur of hypervigilance. I didn't sleep a single wink. I sat in the armchair in Lily's hospital room, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. She looked so small beneath the heavy hospital blankets, her pale skin contrasting sharply with the dark curls she had inherited from, well, now I knew exactly who she'd inherited them from. Every time I looked at her, a wave of profound grief washed over me. I wasn't her mother. Not biologically. The cells that made up her beautiful, kind, brilliant self belonged to my sister and my husband. But then Lily stirred, opening her heavy eyes and looked straight at me. Mommy, she whispered, her voice raspy. My tummy hurts. I leaned over instantly, pressing a warm cloth to her forehead and smoothing her hair back. I know, sweetie. The doctors are working on making it better. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. To the moon and back. As she drifted back to sleep, the grief hardened into concrete. Biological or not, I was her mother. I was the one who knew how she liked her toast cut, the one who sang her to sleep when she was scared of the dark, the one who had spent 7 years building her soul. Eleanor and Chloe might have provided the blueprint, but I built the home, and I was going to protect it. At exactly 7:55 a.m., the door to the pediatric wing opened. I was standing in the hallway outside Lily's room waiting. Chloe walked in alone. She looked miserable, her eyes swollen and red, a heavy denim jacket wrapped tightly around herself. She wouldn't look at me as she approached. Where's Eleanor? I asked, my voice flat. In the car, Chloe muttered, staring at the floor. She's furious with you, Maya. She says you've destroyed the family. Dad is trying to calm her down. Eleanor doesn't have a family, I said coldly. She has a collection of assets. I'm glad to see you actually showed up. For Lily's sake, I told you I want to save her. Chloe snapped, finally looking up, her eyes flashing with defensiveness. You think I'm some kind of monster? I love Lily. I didn't ask for Mom to blackmail you last night. That was her idea. But you went along with the lie for 7 years, Chloe, I reminded her step for step. You let me live a lie. You let me thank God for a miracle that was actually a medical conspiracy. Before Chloe could answer, Dr. Evans walked down the hall, holding a clipboard. He looked relieved to see Chloe. Ah, Miss Vance, thank you for coming in so quickly. We've prepped the lab for the donor evaluation. Given the urgency of Lily's condition, we're fast-tracking the compatibility and health screenings today. Is she a match? I asked. On paper, based on the genetic markers from yesterday's anomaly discovery, she should be a 99% match, Dr. Evans said. We just need to confirm blood compatibility and overall health metrics. If all goes well, we can begin the harvest process by the end of the week. Let's get it over with, Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. I watched her follow Dr. Evans down the corridor. A part of me wanted to feel grateful, but all I felt was a deep, unsettling dread. My family didn't surrender. Eleanor Vance didn't just back down because of an audio recording. She was a woman who always had a backup plan, a counter strategy, a knife hidden in her sleeve. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from an unknown number. Open your email, Maya. Let's see how much you like recordings. My heart plummeted. I opened my mail app. There was an email from an anonymous encrypted address. Attached was a video file. I pressed play with a trembling thumb. The video was low resolution, taken from what looked like a hidden security camera in a dimly lit hotel room. The timestamp on the bottom read 14 months ago. In the video, two people were sitting on the edge of a bed, talking in hushed, intimate tones. It was Mark and it was Chloe. They weren't just talking about a medical procedure. Mark reached out, cupping Chloe's face and kissed her deeply, passionately. Chloe clung to his shirt, pulling him closer. The audio was faint, but Mark's voice came through clearly. We have to be careful. If Maya finds out about us, she'll leave me, and Eleanor will cut us both off. Just wait until the trust fund matures, Chloe. Then we can be together legally. I leaned against the hospital wall, the world spinning violently out of focus. Mark hadn't just used Chloe's egg 7 years ago out of a desperate desire to give me a family. They were having a full-blown, ongoing affair. I didn't confront Mark immediately. I couldn't. If I broke down now, if I allowed the rage to consume me, I would lose my focus, and Lily needed me completely functional. I deleted the video from my phone cache, but saved it to 3 different secure cloud drives. When Mark walked into the hospital cafeteria an hour later, carrying a tray of untouched food, he looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. He looked exhausted, sympathetic, and utterly devoted. It was an incredible performance. For 7 years, I had believed this man was my soulmate. Now looking at him, I realized he was just an actor executing a script written by my mother. Maya, he said softly, setting the tray down, you need to eat something. You're going to make yourself sick. I looked at his hands. The hands that had held mine during my miscarriages. The hands that had had touched my sister in a hotel room 14 months ago. Where were you last March, Mark? I asked, my voice entirely devoid of inflection. Around the 14th? Mark blinked, his eyes darting to the left. A classic tell. Last March? I think I was at that leadership conference in Chicago. Why? Just wondering, I said, taking a sip of the black bitter coffee. My mother texted me. She wants to meet me in the chapel downstairs. Alone. She says she has terms. Mark reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled it back to wrap around my coffee mug. Maya, please. Just hear her out. Whatever she wants, let's just agree to it until Lily is safe. We can deal with the rest of it later. Our daughter is all that matters. Our daughter. The words felt like a slap. You're right, Mark, I said, standing up. Lily is all that matters. I walked out of the cafeteria and took the elevator down to the basement level, where the hospital chapel was located. It was a small, quiet room with stained glass windows that cast muted colors across the empty wooden pews. Eleanor was sitting in the front row, looking like a queen inspecting a conquered territory. She didn't turn around when the heavy door clicked shut behind me. I assume you watched the video, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the sacred space. I did, I said, walking down the aisle and sitting in the pew opposite her, separated by the walkway. Did you film it yourself, Mom? Or did you hire a professional to catch your son-in-law screwing your youngest daughter? Eleanor finally turned her head to look at me, her expression entirely unbothered. I have security on all my properties, Maya, including the boutique hotel Chloe stays at when she visits Chicago. I've known about their little indiscretion for over a year, and you didn't tell me? Why would I? Eleanor shrugged elegantly. It gave me leverage over Mark. It ensured he would stay compliant, keep you happy, and maintain the illusion of the perfect Vance family dynamic. But now, you've forced my hand with that pathetic little recording of yours. You think a video of my husband cheating changes anything? I spat. It just makes me want to destroy all of you even more. Oh, it changes everything, darling, Eleanor said, leaning forward. Because if you release that audio recording of our conversation last night, I will leak this video to the press, to Lily's school network, to everyone we know. I will file for full custody of Lily on Mark's behalf, citing your mental instability and emotional trauma. And with my legal team, I will win. You will be divorced, penniless, and you will never see that little girl again. I stared at her, the sheer scale of her malice taking my breath away. She is a sick child. You are talking about tearing her away from the only mother she has ever known. I am talking about survival, Eleanor corrected sharply. You think you can ruin me? I built this family's reputation from nothing. I will not let a bitter, infertile daughter drag my name through the mud because she can't handle the realities of life. Chloe doesn't love him. You know, I said, the realization suddenly hitting me. Chloe is terrified of you. She's using Mark to try and escape you, but she's too weak to do it. Chloe is a tool, Eleanor said without a shred of maternal affection. Just as Mark was a tool, and just as you are currently being a tool. Here are my final terms, Maya. The transplant happens. Chloe donates. You and Mark remain married publicly for exactly 2 more years, until the family trust matures and the investments are locked. After that, you can quietly divorce, and I will ensure you get a comfortable settlement. If you fight me on this, I will destroy your life today, and Lily will pay the price. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. You have until 5 p.m. to delete your recording and sign the agreement my lawyers are drafting. Don't be foolish, Maya. You can't beat me. She walked past me, her expensive perfume lingering in the air like poison. I sat in the dim chapel, staring at the altar. My mother thought she had won because she held all the cards, but she had made one critical mistake. She thought I was playing the same game she was. She thought I cared about money, reputation, and the Vance family legacy. I didn't care about any of it. I had nothing left to lose except my daughter, and that made me the most dangerous person in her world. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Detective Miller, I said when the line connected. My name is Maya Vance. I need to report a multi-year case of medical fraud, identity theft, and corporate blackmail, and I have all the evidence ready. Detective Sarah Miller met me in a coffee shop 2 blocks away from the hospital. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s, wearing a faded blazer and holding a notebook that looked like it had seen better days. I chose her because 3 years ago, she had investigated a medical malpractice case involving the same fertility clinic my mother used. The case had been mysteriously dropped, undoubtedly due to my mother's legal interference, but I knew Miller hadn't forgotten. I laid it all out on the table: the genetic testing reports from Dr. Evans, the audio recording of my mother's extortion from the previous night, and the video of Mark and Chloe. Miller listened without interrupting, her pen flying across the paper. When I finished, she pushed her glasses up her nose and leaned back, letting out a long whistle. Your mother is Eleanor Vance, Miller stated, more as a fact than a question. The Eleanor Vance who sits on the board of the university hospital and funds half the mayor's campaign. The very same, I said, my voice steady. Can you arrest her? On the audio recording alone? It's tricky, Miller said honestly. Blackmail is hard to prove when it's framed as a family negotiation regarding medical care, and the fertility clinic fraud happened 7 years ago. The statute of limitations on standard medical fraud might have run out, unless we can prove ongoing conspiracy and active falsification of federal birth records. And the video? The video just proves your husband is a jerk and your sister is a backstabber. It's not a crime to have an affair, Maya. Miller sighed, looking at me with genuine sympathy. Look, if I take this to my captain right now, it's going to get flagged. Your mother's lawyers will have it buried before it even hits a judge's desk. We need something definitive. We need the original clinic files, the ones showing the actual egg donor log, and the financial transactions paying off the attending physicians. My mother keeps copies of everything, I said, the memory shifting into place. She has a private safe in her home office. She always says, never trust a digital server when you can hold the leverage in your hands. She keeps a physical binder on every major transaction she's ever done. She calls it her insurance policy. If we get that binder, we have a case, Miller said, her eyes lighting up with a professional spark. But I can't get a search warrant based on a domestic dispute, Maya. I need probable cause, or I need someone to hand it to me. I'll get it, I said. Maya, if she catches you, she won't, I interrupted. She thinks she's broken me. She thinks I'm currently mourning my marriage and preparing to sign her NDA. She expects me to be at her house at 5 p.m. with my tail between my legs. I'll use that meeting to get into her office. I'll be waiting outside the estate gates, Miller said, handing me her card. If you're not out by 5:30, I'm pulling up the driveway with a sirens blaring welfare check. I went back to the hospital to check on Lily. She was sleeping peacefully, her fever finally dropping thanks to the new round of medications. Mark was sitting by her side, looking like the picture-perfect dad. I'm going to my mother's to sign the papers, I told him, keeping my distance. Mark looked up, a wave of profound relief washing over his face. Oh, thank God, Maya, you're doing the right thing. For Lily, I promise you, after this is over, I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. I know you will, Mark, I said, giving him a small, empty smile. I left the hospital and drove toward the gated community where my parents lived. The afternoon sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the asphalt. My hands were perfectly steady on the steering wheel. I wasn't afraid anymore. The woman who could be broken by lies had died in Dr. Evans's office yesterday morning. The woman driving this car was a mother on a mission. The Vance estate was in sprawling monstrosity of stone and glass, surrounded by 10-foot iron gates and a security guard who nodded as I drove through. I parked in the circular driveway, taking a deep breath before stepping out. The heavy front door was opened by Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for my mother since I was a child. She looked at me with worried eyes. Oh, Miss Maya, it is good to see you. Your mother is in the formal sitting room. Thank you, Maria, I said, giving her a quick pat on the arm. I walked into the sitting room. Eleanor was sitting on a velvet sofa, a glass of white wine in her hand. My father was standing by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable. On the glass coffee table between them lay a thick stack of legal documents. You're late, Eleanor said, checking her gold watch. It's 4:50. Traffic was heavy, I lied, walking into the room but refusing to sit. Where's Chloe? Chloe is resting at her apartment, Eleanor said smoothly. She had a long morning at the hospital. The doctors confirmed she is a perfect match for the transplant. The procedure is scheduled for Friday morning, assuming, of course, you sign those documents today. I picked up the pen sitting on top of the paperwork, flipping through the pages. The legalese was dense, but the message was clear. I would forfeit any right to speak about Lily's genetic heritage. I would agree to maintain the marriage with Mark. And if I breached the contract, I would owe the family estate $5 million and forfeit all parental rights. This is very thorough. Mom, I said, tapping the pen against my chin. I don't play games. Maya, Eleanor said, taking a sip of her wine. Sign it and let's put this ugly chapter behind us. I need a glass of water first, I said, putting the pen down. My throat is completely dry. Richard, get her a water, Eleanor commanded my father. No, it's fine, Dad, I said quickly. I'll get it myself. I want to use the restroom anyway. I walked out of the sitting room, but I didn't head for the kitchen or the guest bathroom. As soon as I was out of their line of sight, I slipped down the east hallway toward my mother's private office. The door was heavy mahogany and the handle was locked. I didn't panic. I knew my mother. She kept the spare key in the base of the antique bronze statue of a blind justice that sat on the console table next to the door. I reached underneath, felt the cold metal of the key, and unlocked the door within seconds. The office smelled of leather and old money. I walked straight to the massive painting of our family lineage that hung behind her desk. I swung the frame open, revealing the heavy wall safe underneath. The combination was something I had figured out years ago when I was a teenager looking for my confiscated passport, my mother's own birth date, backwards June 053145. The safe clicked open with a heavy, satisfying thud. Inside were stacks of cash, stock certificates, and at the very back, a series of thick, black leather binders. I pulled out the one labeled Clinic Accounts 2018-2020. I flipped it open. My breath caught. There it was. The original contract between Eleanor Vance and the director of the Center for Advanced Fertility. It detailed a payment of $250,000 under the guise of a charitable donation, explicitly tied to the alteration of medical records for patient Maya Vance. Attached were the medical logs showing Chloe's egg retrieval numbers and the genetic matching sheets with Mark's name listed next to hers. But there was something else in the binder. A tab labeled Chloe, Trust Restructuring. I opened it and read the document quickly, my eyes widening. The family trust fund, worth nearly $20 million, wasn't maturing in 2 years for the investments to lock. According to this amendment, signed by my mother and Mark 14 months ago, the exact month of the hotel video, the trust fund was being restructured to exclude me entirely. If Mark and I divorced after the maturity date, 80% of the wealth would automatically transfer transition to Chloe, and Mark as a joint marital partnership, provided they had a biological child, together to inherit the legacy. Lily was that child. They hadn't just used Chloe's egg to save my mental health. Mark and my mother had planned from the beginning to phase me out once the money was secure, using Chloe as the new biologically compliant wife. Mark's affair with Chloe wasn't an accident. It was part of the deal. Looking for something, Maya? A voice cut through the silence of the office like a gunshot. I spun around. My father was standing in the doorway, looking at me with a profound, heavy sadness in his eyes. I froze, holding the black binder tightly against my chest. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Dad, I breathed. Richard Vance looked at his daughter, then at the open safe, and finally at the documents in my hands. He didn't yell. He didn't call for Eleanor. He just closed the heavy office door behind him, locking us inside. You shouldn't have come here, Maya, he said softly, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who had spent 30 years living in Eleanor's shadow. Did you know about this? I asked, my voice cracking as I held up the trust restructuring documents. Did you know that Mark and Mom were planning to replace me with Chloe? That they used my daughter as a chess piece for an inheritance scheme? Dad walked over to the leather armchair and sat down heavily. He looked old. For the first time, I noticed the deep lines around his eyes and the tremor in his hands. I didn't know about the trust restructuring until last month. Your mother, she handles the finances? She told me it was a tax strategy. It's not a tax strategy, Dad. It's a hostile takeover of my life. Tears spilled over my cheeks. They were going to take Lily from me. They were going to let Mark and Chloe raise my daughter with my family's money while I was cast out as the crazy, infertile ex-wife. Dad looked down at his shoes. Your mother became obsessed after your brother died 20 years ago, Maya. She couldn't handle the loss of control. She decided that everything had to be perfectly managed, perfectly bloodlined. When you couldn't conceive, she saw it as a flaw in her grand design. She manipulated Mark. He was weak, greedy, and easily bought. And you let her do it, I said, the bitterness sharp in my mouth. I was a coward, Maya, he said, looking up, his eyes glassy with tears. Every time I tried to stop her, she threatened to ruin me too. She has files on everyone, including me. But this, what she's doing to you, what she's doing to Lily, it's a bridge too far. He stood up, walking over to me. He reached out and placed his hand over mine, pressing the binder closer to my chest. Take it. Get out of here before she realizes you've been gone too long. Dad, if I use this, she will go to prison. It will destroy everything. Good, he said, a grim, determined smile appearing on his face. It's time this house burned down. Go, Maya. Save my granddaughter. I didn't waste another second. I stuffed the binder into my large tote bag, slipped out of the office through the side patio doors, and ran down the manicured lawn toward the driveway. As I reached my car, I saw Eleanor standing at the front door, her face contorted in sudden realization as she saw me running. Maya, she screamed down the driveway. Stop right there. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door lock, and fired up the engine. I threw the car into reverse, just as Eleanor reached the hood, her hands slamming against the metal. Her face was a mask of pure rage, her elegant composure completely gone. I didn't look back. I sped down the driveway, the iron gates swinging open just in time as Detective Miller's police cruiser pulled up to the curb outside. I rolled down my window, throwing the tote bag into her passenger seat. I have it. I have everything. The clinic fraud, the inheritance conspiracy, all of it. Miller looked at the binder and grinned. Let's go to work. By Thursday evening, the trap was set. Detective Miller and the state attorney's office had spent the last 24 hours verifying the clinic records. The evidence of birth certificate forgery and corporate fraud was ironclad, but we had to time the arrest perfectly. If we moved too early, Eleanor would pull Chloe from the hospital, and Lily's transplant would be compromised. I spent the night in Lily's room, holding her hand. Mark was gone. I had texted him telling him to stay at a hotel because I needed space to process the legal documents. He had greedily agreed, assuming I was preparing to surrender. At 6 a.m. on Friday, Chloe arrived at the hospital for the bone marrow extraction. She looked pale, terrified, and completely alone. She was taken directly to the surgical prep room. At 7:30 a.m., Eleanor and Mark walked into the main lobby of the hospital, looking like a victorious legal team arriving to collect their prize. They walked straight into Dr. Evans's waiting room, where I was sitting with Detective Miller, who was out of uniform. Maya, Eleanor said, stepping forward with an air of absolute authority. Where are the signed documents? My lawyer said they didn't receive the digital copies. I stood up, facing her. The documents are gone, Mom, and so is your leverage. Mark frowned, stepping next to Eleanor. Maya, what are you talking about? We had a deal. For Lily's sake. Lily is safe, Mark, I said, looking at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. Chloe is currently in the surgical wing. The doctors have already administered the local anesthesia. She's donating the marrow right now. She couldn't leave even if she wanted to, because she actually cares about Lily, unlike you two. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her hand tightening around her purse. You think you can play games with me? I will leak that video today. I will take your daughter. You won't take anything, Eleanor, Detective Miller spoke up, stepping forward and pulling her badge from her jacket pocket. Eleanor Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit medical fraud, identity theft, and extortion. Mark Vance, you are under arrest as a co-conspirator in federal financial fraud and record falsification. Mark's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. What? No. Maya, what is this? I saw the trust restructuring paperwork, Mark, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet waiting room. I know about the hotel room in Chicago. I know you and my mother were planning to replace me with my sister to get your hands on $20 million. Maya, please. It was Eleanor's idea. She forced me, Mark cried out, stepping away from my mother as if she were on fire. Be quiet, you idiot, Eleanor hissed, her voice deadly cold. She looked at Detective Miller, then at me. Her expression wasn't one of fear. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. You think this changes anything, Maya? You will still be the infertile woman whose husband chose her sister. You will still be a genetic nobody to that little girl upstairs. No, Mom, I said, stepping closer until I could see the reflection of my own steady, unbreakable eyes in hers. To Lily, I am the woman who saved her life. To the world, you are a criminal. Have a nice flight, Mother. Two uniformed officers stepped into the room, their handcuffs clicking open. Mark broke down, sobbing like a child as they pulled his hands behind his back. Eleanor stood perfectly straight, refusing to bow her head as the steel cuffs locked around her wrists. As they led them down the hallway in front of the hospital staff, I let out a long, ragged breath. The empire had fallen. 3 weeks later, the hospital room smelled like real flowers instead of bleach. Lily was sitting up in bed, a vibrant pink color back in her cheeks. Her hair was starting to thin from the previous treatments, but her eyes were bright, focused, and full of life. The transplant had been a massive success. Her body had accepted the cells with zero complications. She was officially in remission. The door to the room opened quietly, and Chloe stepped inside. She looked different. She had cut her long hair short, and she was wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt, completely devoid of the designer clothes my mother used to buy her. She looked at me, hesitant. Hi, Lily, Chloe said softly, holding a small stuffed bear. Aunt Chloe, Lily chirped, reaching out her small arms. Chloe walked over, hugging her tightly, her eyes filling with tears. She looked over Lily's shoulder at me, an unspoken plea for forgiveness in her gaze. Chloe had turned state's evidence against our mother and Mark because she had been manipulated as a legal dependent 7 years ago and had fully cooperated with the investigation. She was given probation and community service. Mark and Eleanor were currently awaiting trial, facing up to 10 years in federal prison. My father had filed for divorce from Eleanor and was helping me fund Lily's medical trust using his own independent assets. Can you give Mommy and me a minute, sweetie? I asked Lily. Okay? Lily said, turning her attention to the new stuffed bear. Chloe followed me out into the quiet balcony hallway. The morning sun was warm, filling the space with a soft golden light. Thank you, I said to her, genuinely, for staying for the surgery, for doing the right thing in the end. I'm so sorry, Maya, Chloe choked out, her shoulders shaking. I was so stupid. Mark told me you guys were roommates, that you didn't love him anymore. Mom told me I was saving the family. I was too weak to see they were just using me to get to you. We were both victims of Eleanor Vance, Chloe, I said, reaching out and placing a hand on her arm. It was the first time I had touched her in weeks. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. The lie was too big. The betrayal was too deep. I understand, Chloe whispered, wiping her eyes. I want to be a better person for myself and for Lily, even if it's from a distance. That's a good start, I said. I walked back into Lily's room, closing the door on the past. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling my daughter into my lap. I had filed for a divorce from Mark, and I was legally reverting my name and Lily's name back to my maiden line. Not Vance, but my father's mother's name, a lineage built on kindness rather than control. Mommy? Lily asked, looking up at me with her bright, innocent eyes. Why do people say we don't look alike? I smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her smooth head. I didn't feel a single sting of pain, or inadequacy, or grief, because my beautiful girl, I whispered, holding her close against my heart. Some mothers build their babies from scratch, and some mothers have to fight through fire and stone to find them. But the love that holds us together, that's something no doctor, no lie, and no test can ever change. You are mine, and I am yours, forever. Lily snuggled deeper into my chest, her small hands holding onto my shirt. We were going to be just fine.